In my own home live 3 millionaires who got rich by dancing on my grave while I'm still breathing. For 30 years, I broke my back in a logistics warehouse, coming home with grease under my fingernails and bones that creaked like floorboards, all to ensure my wife and 2 children never knew a day of want. I thought I was the provider, the anchor. But to the 2 million strangers watching my life through a lens I never knew was there, I am a monstrous narcissist, a psychological predator, and a toxic shadow that has supposedly withered my family's souls. They turned my silence into malice and my exhaustion into a weapon, filming me in my weakest moments to sell a lie that paid for their designer clothes and luxury vacations. I found out the truth on a Tuesday afternoon when my 7-year-old grandson, Leo, tugged at my sleeve. "Grandpa, why is the lady on the phone saying you hurt Mommy's heart?" he asked, holding up a smartphone. My heart stopped. On the screen was my daughter, Sarah, tears streaming down her face, filming a video in my own kitchen. "He's behind that door right now," she whispered to the camera, her voice trembling with a fake terror that deserved an Oscar. "The air gets heavy when he breathes. This is what it's like living with a high-conflict abuser." The comments section was a shark tank, thousands of people calling for my head, donating money to her escape fund, and praising her bravery for surviving me. I scrolled through the account, healing from Frank, with shaking hands. There were hundreds of videos. My wife, Martha, talking about how I financially strangled her while she wore the diamond earrings I bought for our anniversary. My son, David, explaining the trauma of my high expectations, filmed in the very car I paid off for him last Christmas. They weren't just venting, they were branding me. They had created a fictional version of me, a villain, to justify their own laziness and greed. Every dinner, every tired sigh, every moment of peace was harvested as quote, 10 quote, for their cult of followers. I wasn't a father or a husband anymore. I was a profitable monster, and they were preparing for their biggest payday yet, my total destruction. The realization didn't hit me all at once. It felt more like a slow, cold drowning. As I sat in my recliner that night, the house felt like a movie set. Every shadow seemed to hide a lens. I waited until the house was quiet, the glow of their bedroom lights finally fading, before I grabbed my tablet. I searched for the handle Leo had shown me. Quote 11 wasn't just a small page, it was a goddamn industry. It had over 2 million followers across 3 platforms. I watched a video titled, Quote 12. In it, Martha, my wife of 35 years, sat in our living room with a strategically placed box of tissues. She told a story about how I had, quote, 13 her from seeing her sister last summer. The truth was, her sister had been sick with a contagious flu, and I had simply suggested Martha wait a few days so she wouldn't catch it. But in the video, Martha sobbed about how I used isolation tactics to break her spirit. The comments were brutal. People I had never met were calling me a ghoul and a subhuman. I clicked on another video. This one featured my son, David. He was 30 years old and still lived in the basement I finished with my own hands. He was explaining how my obsession with work was actually a form of abandonment. He used his job to avoid us, David told his followers, while wearing a $300 hoodie I'd paid for. He provided money because he was too emotionally bankrupt to provide love. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the tablet. I wasn't a person to them. I was a resource to be consumed, and when the money from my paycheck wasn't enough, they decided to sell my reputation for parts. I looked at the view counts. Millions. Every click was a penny in their pockets, and every penny was built on a lie about the man sleeping just down the hall. I spent the rest of that night spiraling down a rabbit hole of my own betrayal. I found their Patreon page, a private sanctuary where followers paid $20 a month for exclusive evidence of my abuse. I felt like a ghost, haunting my own hallways. I clicked on a locked post that had been leaked on a forum. It was a video of me from 2 months ago. I had just come home from a double shift at the warehouse. I was sweaty, my back was screaming in pain, and I was sitting at the kitchen table with my head in my hands, trying to find the strength to go upstairs. The caption read, "The narcissist's cold stare. Notice how he refuses to acknowledge his family's presence. This is stonewalling, a classic tactic to make us feel invisible." In reality, I was just trying not to faint from exhaustion. I watched as Sarah panned the camera from my tired face to her own frightened expression. The level of calculation was chilling. They weren't just recording me, they were directing a horror movie where I was the monster. Then I found the shop. They were selling merchandise, T-shirts that said, quote 24, quote, and quote 25, quote. It was surreal. My name was being used as a brand for, quote 26, quote. I realized then that they didn't want me to change. If I were actually the man they described, they would have been too terrified to film me. They knew I was a good man. They knew I was safe. And that was the most disgusting part. They used my kindness and my predictable, steady nature as the foundation for their lies, because they knew I would never strike back. They had built a gold mine out of my character, and they were stripping the land bare until there would be nothing left of me but a hollow shell. They were getting rich by selling my soul to a crowd of strangers who wanted a villain to hate. The air in the house felt heavy, like a storm was about to break. One evening I stood in the hallway, hidden by the shadows, and listened to a conversation in the kitchen. My wife, Martha, and my daughter, Sarah, were clinking wine glasses. "The sponsor wants something big, Sarah," Martha said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "They're offering $50,000 for a 3-hour live stream of our great escape. We need Frank to do something truly awful. If he just sits there like a statue, the engagement will drop." Sarah let out a sharp, cynical laugh. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll provoke him. I'll bring up his father or the house repairs. If he so much as raises his voice, we've got our clip. We'll film the movers taking our stuff out while he rages in the background. It's the perfect ending for the season." I leaned against the wall, my heart hammering against my ribs. They weren't just lying anymore. They were actively plotting to destroy what was left of my life for a sponsorship deal. They planned to move into a luxury condo they'd already scouted, paid for by the followers had built. The plan was to leave me with an empty house, a ruined reputation, and a mountain of legal fees. They even talked about filing a restraining order just to add, quote, 31, quote, to the stream. They sat there, sipping expensive wine bought with my money, planning how to frame me as a violent man just to satisfy a digital audience. I wasn't their family. I was a sacrificial lamb they were fattening up for the slaughter. I realized then that I couldn't just be sad. I had to be smart. They wanted a show? Fine. I was going to give them one they would never forget. The next morning, I looked at them across the breakfast table. Martha was busy typing on her phone, likely a quote 32 about how tense the atmosphere was. Sarah was checking the lighting on her camera, pretending to take a selfie while actually capturing me in the background. I saw it all now, the way they tilted their phones, the way they whispered into their microphones when I walked by. My entire existence had been reduced to a prop for their social media performance. They didn't see a father or a husband. They saw a paycheck with a pulse. I went to my local bank that afternoon. I found out that Martha had been slowly siphoning money into a hidden account for months. She had already moved nearly 40% of our joint savings. She wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to rob me blind while the world cheered her on. But instead of confronting them and giving them the quote 34 quote they desperately needed, I did something they never expected. I stayed completely calm. I walked back into that house with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I knew their schedule now. I knew their grand finale was set for 10 days away. I had exactly 10 days to build my own stage and ensure that when the curtain rose, they would be the ones blinded by the lights. I knew I couldn't fight fire with fire. I had to fight it with the truth. The next day, I met with a security specialist. I explained the situation, not as a victim, but as a man who needed his life back. He helped me purchase a series of high-end, professional-grade cameras and microphones. Over the next 2 nights, while Martha and the kids were out spending my money at, quote, 36, quote, for their upcoming fame, I went to work. I placed them in the common areas, the kitchen where they plotted, the living room where they rehearsed their, quote, 37 scenes, and the dining room where they laughed about their, quote, 38. I also had the specialist set up a bypass for our home's smart TV and the main Wi-Fi network. I wanted to make sure that whatever they tried to broadcast, I had a way to intercept it. Watching the live feed from my tablet for the first time was like watching a horror movie. I caught my son David practicing his, quote, 39 walk in the hallway. I heard Martha on the phone with their sponsor, promising that the, quote, 40 would be, quote, 41. They were walking straight into a trap. The following days were a bizarre psychological game. Martha and Sarah were rampaging through the house, trying every trick in the book to get a reaction out of me. One evening, as I was sitting at the table eating a simple sandwich, Sarah deliberately knocked my plate onto the floor. The ceramic shattered. Sarah immediately pulled out her phone, pointing it at my face. Quote 42, she hissed into the microphone, her voice dripping with artificial fear. I looked down at the mess. Then I looked at her. I didn't yell. I didn't even frown. I stood up, walked to the pantry, grabbed a broom, and started cleaning it up. I actually whistled a little tune. I could see the sheer frustration in her eyes. Later that night, I watched the footage from my hidden cameras. I saw the 3 of them gathered in the kitchen, looking furious. David complained. Martha leaned against the counter. They had no idea that I was recording every word of their conspiracy. They were so blinded by their own greed that they couldn't see the man they called dumb was now the one holding all the cards. The night of the grand finale arrived like a cold fog. The house was buzzing with a strange, frantic energy. They had invited their most loyal followers to a historic live event. I stayed in my bedroom, watching the setup through the feed on my tablet. The chat on their stream was moving so fast I could barely read it. Thousands of people were calling for my ruin. At 7 p.m., I heard the heavy thud of boxes being dragged across the floor. I saw Sarah position her phone near the top of the stairs. She whispered to her audience, "Tonight is the night we take our power back. Frank has no idea what's coming." I took a deep breath and smoothed out my shirt. I walked out of my room and headed toward the living room. Martha stood there, her face contorted into a mask of fake terror. "Frank, stay back!" she shrieked for the camera. "We're leaving you. We've taken the money, and we're telling the world the truth." On the giant smart TV behind her, I saw the stream. Over 50,000 people were watching live. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small remote. "You're right, Martha," I said. "The world does deserve the truth, but they aren't getting it from you." I clicked the button, and the smart TV behind them flickered to life. The screen showed the kitchen scene from 3 nights ago. The audience on the live stream saw Martha laughing hysterically as she counted a stack of cash. "Those idiots actually believe I'm scared of him," her recorded voice boomed. "Every tear I shed is another $1,000 in the bank." Martha froze, her face turning a ghostly shade of white. Sarah dropped her phone, but the camera was still rolling, capturing her panicked expression as the TV switched to another clip. This one showed David practicing his victim face in the mirror. The chat on the live stream exploded. I watched the comments flip from "Save them" to "Are you kidding me?" and "This is a total scam" in a matter of seconds. I stood there, arms crossed. "The sponsorship is gone, Sarah," I said quietly. "And Martha, the bank called. Your hidden account has been frozen. You wanted to show the world what living with me was like? Well, now they see what living with you is like." Martha tried to lunge for the TV, screaming, but it was too late. I walked out the front door, leaving them to face the furious digital mob they had created. The aftermath was swifter than I imagined. By the next morning, the Healing from Frank accounts had been deactivated. Martha, Sarah, and David were no longer brave survivors. They were the faces of a massive social media scandal. They ended up moving out to a cramped apartment Sarah could barely afford. As for me, I sold that big, empty house and used the money to buy a small cabin near the mountains. I've taken up woodworking, and I spend my mornings hiking in silence. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like I'm being watched. I'm not a monster. I'm just Frank, a man who finally reclaimed his name and his peace. Looking back, some people tell me I was too cold, that I should have handled it privately. But they didn't just lie to me. They tried to erase who I was for money. So, I have to ask you, did I do the right thing by exposing them in front of the whole world? Or would you have found a different way to handle a family that turned your life into a viral lie? What would you have done if you were in my shoes? If you enjoyed this story of justice and a fresh start, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another gripping story. The end. Thank you for listening.